This is what life looks like for people living in other countries right now. And this is Singapore today. On September 24th, Singapore re-tightened its community-safe management measures in response to the rise in COVID-19 cases. These changes were introduced even though we have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, a comparatively low death rate, and an assurance in the past few months that this is the light at the end of the tunnel.
I know many are fatigued and tired, but we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel.
For those hoping to live with an endemic COVID-19, these new measures seem to be a step back. Interestingly, most Singaporeans are actually in favour of these restrictions. In a recent survey, most people in Singapore said that they feel like the latest restrictions on social gatherings are just right. And in another survey, a significant majority of respondents said that they still fear catching the virus. Are Singaporeans actually ready to live with an endemic COVID-19? It's clear that the answer is no. Not yet at least. Because, among other things, endemicity is a state of mind. Let me explain. First things first, it's understandable to still feel worried about COVID-19. This has been cited, even by authorities, as the main reason for tightened restrictions. And for good reason. An increase in the number of COVID-19 cases results in a higher likelihood that more COVID cases will need intensive care. A maxed out ICU means that appropriate care can't be rendered to those who need it. And that could lead to death. And we don't want death. And as I'm saying this, I'm aware that statistics are on my side. I don't have an underlying precondition, and I am statistically likely to recover from COVID-19 with relative ease. But not everyone has those odds. The rise in cases means an increased likelihood that the elderly and the vulnerable will catch COVID-19, and an increased likelihood that they will die. And dying is bad, and we should avoid that. A lot of our opening up plans depend on vaccinations, but at this point, children still can't get vaccinated. This is naturally a key concern for parents, especially if they are also supporting elderly parents. So of course they're worried, but if we are to live with COVID-19 as endemic, we need to understand that the situation isn't the same as last year.
When SARS coronavirus 2 first emerged from China, it carried with it a fatality rate of about 3% to 9%. So depending on the access to healthcare and a number of things, but essentially it was quite an alarming disease. But vaccination has changed all of that. Vaccination has now made the SARS coronavirus 2 infection, even with Delta, into mostly a flu-like illness, or mostly asymptomatic. Now, in that context, we can live with COVID.
And Professor Wee isn't the only person saying this. According to a recent Yale Medicine study, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are both highly effective in preventing symptomatic and severe illness from a COVID-19 infection. And that is essentially the key. Singapore has now vaccinated more than 80% of its population, but we are still not yet mentally prepared to live without the fear of getting infected by the virus, even if most of us will not be in a critical condition. It is true daily cases have increased since end August, and our hospitals are stretched. But it's not because a lot of people are suffering from serious COVID-19 symptoms. As of now, the number of severely ill COVID cases remains within expectations. However, there has been an increase in COVID-positive cases with mild symptoms, seeking medical attention in hospitals when it might not be necessary. The goal of home recovery is to reserve healthcare services for those who actually need it. Basically, the elderly and the vulnerable, who might suffer from more severe illness. COVID-19 treatment facilities have also been established to look after patients who are generally well, but have underlying health conditions that require close monitoring. If these measures succeed, then they can be adequately taken care of, and the risk of them dying from COVID-19 may be reduced. Studies conducted by NUH and KKH show that out of 259 children in Singapore who contracted COVID-19, only about half had mild symptoms, while the rest had no symptoms at all. And there is also a lot of research being done to test if vaccines are safe for those under 12. So there's reason to believe that a vaccine will soon be suitable for their use. I guess I haven't been cavalier about the whole situation in this video, but let me get serious for a bit. Yes, people will die from COVID-19, and it's incredibly hard for anyone to say dying from COVID-19 is okay. And you're right, we should aim to not have anyone die from COVID-19. But I just want to present some perspective. Our COVID-19 mortality rate is still one of the lowest in the world. In comparison, here's the mortality rate for dengue in 2020. And about 800 people die of influenza-associated deaths here each year. Yet Singapore has learned to live with dengue by using cautionary measures. And we also treat the flu as nothing more than an inconvenience.
I'm pretty sure that we as a community have not done well enough to communicate that what we call COVID this year is not the same as what we called COVID last year. I mean, the name is still the same, but the outcome is very different. And I think the context is important, right? It's not whether you acquire SARS-2 infection or not, it's what's the outcome of the infection. I think the messaging needs to be clearer. And to me, the simplest is just to call it a different thing. So one possibility is let's differentiate it into flu-like COVID, COVID with warning signs, and severe COVID.
Of course, there is an alternative, and that is a zero-case policy. We continue to cyclically tighten and loosen safe distancing measures, we continue to restrict our borders, and we continue to aim for as little COVID-19 cases as possible. Here's what's at stake for this alternative. In another survey, 37% of respondents said that their household financial situation has worsened. Mental health has also declined, with 76% of the respondents feeling sad or depressed. Elderly suicide cases are also at an all-time high since 1991, and business sentiments among Singapore SMEs has seen a historic low.
So I think in Singapore, we also have to ask ourselves, how long can we keep this up for before we open up? Because the not opening up is not an option. Singapore will cease to exist if we don't open up at some point, because our economy, our livelihoods, everything depend on Singapore being a hub for trade and travel and transportation and all that. So at some point, we have to open up.
To be fair, there can be cases made for either option, and it's not an easy decision to make at all. Whether we start to open up or still aim for zero-case tolerance, they both come with costs. But which of these costs are we willing to bear? When the time to open eventually comes, here are some things you can expect to happen. Number 1. You're likely to get COVID-19 at some point. An endemic COVID-19 means we learn to live with the virus, and that it circulates amongst the population at low levels. But if you're vaccinated, it's likely that you will be asymptomatic or experience mild symptoms. Number 2. Case numbers will rise, or at least remain higher for a while, and regular COVID-19 testing may also become part of your routine.
Delta is all over the world. It may be Delta or it's going to be another variant, but this virus is here to stay. To me, it's a question of when do you have to take this bitter pill? You have to, right? Because the virus is going to come in. But we can trust the vaccine to turn it from what would otherwise be a potentially lethal infection into what is now mostly a mild flu-like illness.
Of course, at the end of the day, some of this may be easier said than done. People are still scared and frustrated, and this is completely valid. The 4-stage roadmap for COVID resilience has been in place for some time now. But until the people of Singapore are ready to move forward, it could be quite a while before we are back to the normal that we were once used to.